I'm 79, and my knees scream every time I climb a staircase. But they've never hurt as much as the moment I heard my own son say, clear as a slammed door, "You're not family anymore." I was halfway up the stairs when he said it, one hand on the railing, the other pressed to my thigh, breathing through the ache. I almost missed the next sentence. Almost. Hello, my dears. When I heard this story, my chest tightened. Imagine climbing toward your own child and hearing that. What would you do in Harriet's place? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if stories like this matter to you. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was just trying to reach the guest room, my room now, though the house was bought with the money from selling mine. Their hallway smelled like lemon disinfectant and something burnt from the air fryer. I heard my daughter-in-law, Colleen, whispering sharply, "We can't keep pretending. The paperwork needs to be filed before she changes her mind." "I know," my son Daniel replied. His voice was tired, irritated. "But we have to handle it carefully. She's stubborn. If she fights it, it'll get messy." Handle what carefully? I stayed still. At 79, people assume you move slowly because you're fragile. Sometimes you move slowly because you're listening. Colleen sighed. Once she's declared incapable, it won't matter what she wants. Declared incapable. The word settled into my bones heavier than arthritis. Incapable. I'd managed a bakery for 32 years. I could still fold phyllo dough thinner than tissue and balance accounts in my head faster than most people could find a calculator. Incapable of what, exactly? Breathing without permission? Daniel lowered his voice, but I caught it. It's for the best. She's not really family anymore anyway. Not the way things are. Not family. The staircase seemed to tilt. I felt the old oak under my palm, solid, familiar. I'd helped pay for that oak when they remodeled. My house, sold 6 months ago, had funded this fresh start for all of us. We were supposed to live together, support each other. That was the plan. That was the story they told me over chamomile tea and careful smiles. I finished the climb. One step, then another. Each one slower than the last, not from pain, but from the way my chest felt hollowed out. When I reached the hallway, I straightened my cardigan and knocked lightly before entering the den. Colleen was on the sofa, her tablet glowing. Daniel stood near the window, arms crossed. They both jumped. "Oh, Mom," Daniel said too quickly. "We didn't hear you." "I didn't want to interrupt," I replied. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. Interrupt what? Colleen smiled the way people do when they're trying on politeness, like it's a coat that doesn't quite fit. Just discussing some future planning. You know, making sure everyone's taken care of. I see. I looked from one to the other. And am I included in this everyone? Daniel exhaled. Of course you are. But he didn't meet my eyes. They offered me tea. Chamomile again. I accepted it. My hands didn't shake. I watched them closely over the rim of the mug. Colleen's nails were freshly done, a glossy plum color. Daniel's jaw was tight. Mom, he began carefully, have you ever thought about assisted living? Somewhere with more structure? Activities? People your own age? I have people my own age, I said. I've outlived most of them. Colleen let out a small, humorless laugh. Daniel pressed on. We just worry about you. The stairs, the cooking, it's a lot. It wasn't too much when I was wiring you money for the down payment, I said softly. Silence. Colleen shifted. That was different. How? I asked. Neither answered. I finished my tea and set the cup down gently on a coaster shaped like a monstera leaf. Little details matter when the big ones start slipping. I'm tired, I said. Climbing stairs takes it out of me. That's exactly what we're talking about, Daniel replied quickly. I nodded. I'm sure it is. I left the room before they could say more. My knees throbbed as I climbed the final few steps to the guest room. My guest room, the smallest bedroom in a house partly paid for by my life savings. Inside, I closed the door and leaned against it, declared incapable, not family anymore. I walked to the dresser and opened the top drawer. My bank folder was still there, tucked beneath a linen nightgown and a sachet of dried lavender. I ran my fingers over the papers, statements, account numbers, copies of transfers. 3 weeks ago, Daniel had insisted on helping me set up online access so he could monitor for scams. I had agreed. I trusted him. He was my son. Tonight, I turned on my laptop. It took a moment to load. It always does. I typed carefully, each key deliberate. When the account screen appeared, I stared at the numbers. Something was off. 2 transfers labeled Home Improvement Reimbursement. 1 last month, 1 this week. I hadn't authorized either. The amounts weren't enormous, not yet. But they were enough to buy more than lemon disinfectant and a new air fryer. My knees ached as I sat there. But the pain felt distant now, secondary. If I wasn't family, then what was I? A liability, an obstacle, a signature. I closed the laptop slowly. They thought I was climbing stairs without hearing them. They thought age meant ignorance. They thought love meant permission. They were wrong. I might be 79. I might wince at every step. I might need to hold the railing, but I built a business from flour and sugar during a recession. I buried a husband and kept going. I raised a son who once held my hand crossing streets. If they wanted to declare me incapable, they were about to learn exactly how capable I still was. The next morning, I woke before everyone else. Habit. Bakers don't sleep late. Our bodies are trained to rise before the sun thinks about it. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I heard the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the faint mechanical sigh of their smart thermostat adjusting itself like it owned the place. My knees protested as I sat up. I massaged them slowly, the way my physiotherapist once showed me, pressing into the joint until the ache softened from a scream to a complaint. I dressed carefully. Navy slacks, a cream blouse, the pearl earrings Daniel gave me on my 70th birthday. Back when I was still unquestionably his mother. When I came downstairs, Colleen was already in the kitchen, whisking something green in a glass bowl. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Good morning." Daniel entered a moment later, tying his tie. He kissed her cheek. He did not kiss mine. I poured myself coffee. They'd switched to some bitter, single-origin blend that tasted like regret and burnt almonds. I missed my old percolator, the steady chug and the smell that filled my kitchen, like a promise. "We were thinking," Colleen began, her tone casual in that rehearsed way, "maybe it's time we streamline some things." "Streamline?" I repeated. "Yes," she said brightly. "Simplify responsibilities. You've been doing too much." Daniel nodded. "You don't have to cook dinner anymore, Mom, or do laundry. We can handle it." "That's kind," I said. "Though I've been cooking since before you could hold a spoon." "It's not about ability," he said quickly. "It's about safety." There it was again. Safety. In the span of 12 hours, I'd become a fragile antique in need of bubble wrap. "And the grocery shopping?" I asked. "We'll take care of it," Colleen replied. "Actually, we already set up a joint card so it's easier to track expenses." For the household. I looked at her. A joint card? Daniel cleared his throat. Just for transparency, so we can see what's being spent. With whose money? I asked calmly. He hesitated. It's all going into the same household now, Mom. No, it wasn't. I sipped my coffee and let the bitterness sit on my tongue. I'd like to see the statements. Colleen's whisk paused midair. Why? Because I'm old, I said lightly, and apparently incapable. Daniel stiffened. That's not what we meant. It's what I heard. Silence spread across the kitchen, thick as overcooked porridge. Colleen recovered first. You must have misunderstood. I have excellent hearing, I replied. Daniel stepped closer. Mom, don't start. We're trying to help you. Help. Another generous word with sharp edges. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug myself. I have an appointment today. With who? Daniel asked immediately. A friend. That wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't entirely false either. At my age, you learn that information is currency. Spend it carefully. Upstairs, I retrieved my folder and slipped a few documents into my handbag. Alongside my lipstick, a folded shopping list I no longer needed, and a small tin of anise lozenges. Before leaving, I passed the den. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, on the desk, sat a slim gray folder I hadn't seen before. Curiosity isn't a sin. It's survival. I stepped inside. The folder wasn't locked. That was their first mistake. On the cover, in neat black ink, were the words, H. Whitaker, Capacity Review. My name, my maiden name, technically, the one still attached to my primary accounts. I opened it. Printed emails, notes, a checklist. Discuss observed confusion. Document physical limitations. Schedule evaluation. Prepare guardianship petition if necessary. My vision sharpened. There was even a draft letter addressed to some firm I didn't recognize, outlining concerns about my declining judgment, referencing recent unusual financial decisions. Unusual financial decisions, like selling my house and handing them the proceeds? Footsteps sounded in the hallway. I closed the folder smoothly and returned it exactly as I'd found it, aligning the edges with the desk blotter. 32 years in a bakery teaches you about presentation. Nothing crooked, nothing obvious. I exited just as Colleen appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Heading out? She asked. Yes. Where did you say you were going? I didn't. Her smile tightened. We worry, Harriet. That's all. I know, I said, and I'm so grateful. Outside, the air was crisp. I walked slowly to the curb where I'd called a taxi. Daniel had suggested I stop driving for everyone's peace of mind. I'd agreed. For now. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the house. My money in the walls, my son in the doorway, my daughter-in-law behind him, arms folded. They thought they were managing a situation. They didn't realize they were creating one. The taxi driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Bank? He asked. I smiled faintly. Yes, I said. The bank? The bank smelled the way banks always do. Cool air, polished counters, and a faint trace of printer toner. I took a number and sat down carefully, placing my handbag on my lap like it contained something fragile. In a way, it did. When my turn came, I asked for a private office. Not loudly, not dramatically, just calmly, the way someone asks for a glass of water. The young woman who led me inside introduced herself as Marissa. She couldn't have been older than 35, efficient haircut, clear eyes. How can I help you today, Mrs. Whitaker? I placed 2 printed statements on her desk. I'd like to review some recent transfers, and I'd like to understand exactly who has access to my accounts. She nodded and began typing. Her fingers moved quickly, professionally. I watched her face instead of the screen. That's where the truth usually shows first. Yes, she said slowly. I see 2 external transfers labeled Home Improvement Reimbursement, authorized through online credentials. By whom? I asked. Well, technically, by you. The login credentials were used. I did not authorize those transfers. Her eyes flicked up to mine. Are you the only one with access to your login information? I let a beat of silence stretch between us. My son helped me set it up, I said, for protection from scams. Marissa's fingers paused on the keyboard. I see, she replied carefully. Please tell me, I continued, my voice steady, what formal authority he has over my accounts. She checked again. There is a secondary contact listed for account assistance, and there's a pending request for durable power of attorney documentation. It hasn't been completed yet. Pending. So it's not active? No, ma'am. We haven't received final notarized paperwork. I exhaled quietly. Good, I said. Marissa leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Whitaker, if you believe your credentials have been compromised, even by a family member, we can immediately reset your online access, issue new account numbers, and place additional security measures. I would like that, I said. She studied me for a moment. Not with pity, with assessment. Are you feeling pressured in any way to transfer funds or relinquish control of your finances? There it was, the question that mattered. No, I said slowly, but I am being discussed. She didn't smile. Understood. Within 20 minutes, my online access was frozen. New credentials issued. A temporary hold placed on outgoing transfers above a certain amount. We added a verbal passphrase, something only I would know. What would you like your passphrase to be? She asked. I thought for a second. Apricot galette, I said. She blinked. I'm sorry? Apricot galette, I repeated. With almond frangipani. She typed it in. Before I left, I added one more instruction. If anyone calls or visits claiming to represent me, you are to contact me directly, not my son, not anyone else. Of course, Marissa said. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the sun felt warmer than it had that morning. My knees still hurt. That hadn't changed. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't powerless. I walked 2 blocks to a small cafe I used to visit years ago. It was still there, though renovated. Exposed brick, hanging plants, menus written in chalk. I ordered a slice of lemon olive oil cake and sat by the window. My phone buzzed before I finished the first bite. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, he said, not bothering with a greeting. Did you go to the bank? Yes. Why? Because it's my bank. There was a pause. Then, they called me. Said online access was being reset. Correct. You didn't tell me. I didn't need to. His voice hardened. We were managing that account together. No, I said calmly. You were observing it. I was managing it. Mom, you're making this harder than it has to be. For whom? I asked. Silence again. You don't understand how complicated things can get, he continued. Taxes, liabilities. If something happens to you, if something happens to me, I interrupted gently, it will not be because I can't read my own bank statement. His breathing grew louder in my ear. Colleen thinks, I don't care what Colleen thinks, I said, still quiet. This is between you and me. That stopped him. I heard what you said last night, I added. Another silence. Longer this time. You weren't supposed to, he muttered. That doesn't change the fact that I did. He didn't apologize. Instead, he said, You're overreacting. I looked down at my cake, at the thin glaze shining under the cafe lights. No, Daniel, I replied. I'm responding. By the time I returned home, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. He must have left work early. That alone told me more than any raised voice could. I entered through the front door slowly, setting my handbag on the console table. The house was quiet in that artificial way. Too quiet, like a stage waiting for actors. Daniel stepped out of the den. His tie was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. Why would you freeze the account? He asked without preamble. I didn't freeze it, I replied. I secured it. You made it look like fraud. I met his eyes. Was it? His jaw tightened. Mom. No, I said gently. Answer the question. Colleen appeared behind him, arms folded. This is exactly what we were afraid of, she said. Paranoia. Impulsiveness. I reset my passwords, I said. That's not paranoia, that's hygiene. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. We're trying to build something stable here. You coming in and changing things without talking to us first. Talking to you first? I repeated. About my own money? It's not just your money anymore, Colleen snapped before she could stop herself. There it was, naked and unvarnished. I looked at her carefully. Explain that. She faltered for half a second. I mean, it's invested in the household. The renovations. The upgrades. The property value. My contribution was a gift, I said evenly. Not a merger. Daniel stepped forward. You said you wanted this to be our shared future. I did, I replied. Shared, not transferred. He exhaled sharply. You don't understand the long-term plan. I understand enough. Silence thickened between us again. Colleen's voice shifted, softer now but colder. You're making yourself look unstable, Harriet. Going to the bank behind our backs. Freezing accounts. That's the kind of behavior evaluators notice. Evaluators. So it was already moving forward. I felt something inside me settle into place. Not panic, not rage. Precision. Good, I said calmly. Then they'll notice I acted before any documents were finalized. Daniel stared at me. What documents? I held his gaze. The ones labeled capacity review. The color drained from his face. Colleen recovered faster. You went through our things. You left it open, I said. On your desk. That was private. So are my finances. Daniel's voice dropped. Mom, we were only exploring options in case something happened. What something? I asked. You fell last month. I tripped on your new rug. That's exactly the point, he said. You're not as steady as you used to be. Neither are you, I replied softly. He blinked. You're standing on money that isn't yours and calling it security. Colleen's composure cracked. We have invested everything into this house. And I invested everything into you, I said. The words hung there. Daniel looked away first. We can still fix this, he muttered. Yes, I agreed. We can. He looked back at me, hopeful for a split second. First, I continued, you will withdraw any pending legal paperwork immediately. Neither of them spoke. Second, I said, from this moment on, no one accesses my accounts but me. Colleen laughed softly. You can't manage all of that alone? I ran payroll for 12 employees in 1987 without software, I replied. I think I can manage a login screen. Daniel's frustration returned. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being clear. Colleen stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you make this adversarial, Harriet, it won't end the way you think. I studied her face, the confidence, the calculation. I don't intend to make it adversarial, I said. I intend to make it formal. Daniel stiffened. What does that mean? It means, I replied evenly, that from now on, every decision will be documented, every conversation recorded, every step deliberate. You wouldn't. I already have. That wasn't entirely true, but it would be. Daniel looked at me as though he were seeing someone unfamiliar, not frail, not confused, strategic. I'm going upstairs, I said. My knees hurt. This time, neither of them offered to help me climb. Halfway up the staircase, I paused, not because of pain, but because I wanted them to hear me clearly. One more thing, I said without turning around. If I'm not family anymore, then you should stop spending like I am. I continued up the stairs, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time since moving in, I felt the weight shift in my favor. The fundraiser was Colleen's idea. Community visibility, she called it, a school expansion project for my grandson Oliver's private academy. String lights, silent auction tables, champagne flutes that cost more than my first oven. I wore my deep green wool coat and a silk scarf I'd bought in Florence in 1978. It still smelled faintly of cedar from careful storage. If they were going to parade me around, I would at least look like myself. Daniel drove. The ride was quiet, except for the soft hum of the tires. My knees throbbed from the cold, but I didn't mention it. Pain had become background noise. Betrayal had not. The venue glittered. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors. A trio played something airy and forgettable near the entrance. Colleen moved through the crowd like she belonged there, laughing lightly, touching elbows, introducing Daniel to men in tailored suits. "And this is Harriet," she said at one point, gesturing toward me as though unveiling a decorative heirloom. "Daniel's mom. She's staying with us." Staying, not living, not contributing. Staying. A woman with a severe bob and diamond studs smiled at me. "It must be such a comfort for them having you close." "Oh," I replied, smiling back. "We're all very invested in each other." Daniel shot me a look. We moved toward the silent auction tables, weekend spa retreats, wine tastings, a handcrafted chess set carved from ebony and maple. I noticed Daniel's eyes linger on a luxury golf package. He didn't write his name down. Not yet. At the bar, two men were speaking in low voices. I recognized one of them as the contractor who'd overseen the renovations on the house. "Once the equity line clears," the contractor was saying, "we can start phase 2. "Good," Daniel replied. "We're just finalizing some internal things." Internal things. I stepped closer. "Daniel," I said lightly. "What equity line?" He turned too quickly. "Just business talk, Mom." The contractor glanced at me politely. "You must be proud. Beautiful home you all have." "It was," I said, "a very solid investment." Daniel's smile tightened. Later, while Colleen was busy bidding on a culinary tour of Napa, I wandered toward a quieter hallway. My knees appreciated the break. I found a small seating area near the coat check and lowered myself carefully into a chair. Two women stood nearby, unaware of me. "I heard they're restructuring everything," one whispered. About time, the other replied. It's risky keeping assets in the name of someone at her age. Her age? I didn't need to look to know they meant me. They're moving quickly, the first continued, before things get complicated. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane, one I rarely used but had brought tonight for effect as much as support. Complicated how? I asked pleasantly. They startled. Oh, Mrs. Whitaker, I supplied. The woman with the bob flushed. We didn't realize you were there. That seems to be a theme lately, I said. They mumbled something about checking the auction table and hurried away. When I returned to the main hall, Daniel and Colleen were in animated conversation with a couple I didn't recognize. I caught only fragments as I approached. Transitioning responsibilities. Long-term care planning. Better to act early. Colleen saw me first. Harriet, we were just telling Mark and Elise how proactive we're being about family planning. Planning what exactly? I asked. Daniel answered before she could. Future security. For whom? I said. Mark chuckled awkwardly. Well, these things are delicate. Yes, I agreed. They are. Colleen's hand tightened around her champagne glass. We're only trying to avoid confusion later. I'm not confused, I said calmly. Are you? Daniel's jaw flexed. Mom, this isn't the place. No, I agreed again. It isn't. I reached into my purse and pulled out my bidding paddle. I hadn't planned to use it, but plans evolve. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Next item, a private dining experience for 8, curated by Chef Laurent. Opening bid, $5,000. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I raised my paddle. Heads turned. Daniel's eyes widened. Mom, $5,000, the auctioneer called. Another paddle lifted. 6. I raised mine again. 7. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. What are you doing? Participating, I replied. The bidding climbed. 8. 9. At 10,000, the room grew quiet. I lifted my paddle one final time. 10,000, the auctioneer declared. Going once, going twice. Sold. Applause scattered politely across the hall. Colleen stared at me. That's outrageous. I lowered my paddle. Is it? Daniel's voice was tight. You can't just spend like that. I just did, I said. He leaned closer. We discussed budgeting. No, I corrected. You discussed controlling. The couple beside us shifted uncomfortably. I smiled serenely. It's my money. Or is that still under review? Daniel's face flushed. I leaned in slightly so only he could hear me. If you're planning to leverage my assets for your phase 2, I whispered, you might want to reconsider your timeline. He stared at me, something like uncertainty flickering in his eyes for the first time. The auction continued around us, clinking glasses, polite laughter, the smell of truffle oil drifting from the catering tables. But the real negotiation had already begun. The morning after the fundraiser, the house felt different, quieter, but not in the careful way from before. This was watchful silence, measured. I came downstairs to find the kitchen rearranged. My ceramic jar of Malden salt, gone. The olive oil I preferred replaced with a cheaper brand. Even my favorite teacup, the thin porcelain one with the faded blue iris, was missing from its usual hook. Good morning, I said. Colleen stood at the counter scrolling through her phone. Morning. Daniel was already dressed for work. I noticed some changes, I said lightly. We're reorganizing, Colleen replied. Too many things were cluttering the space. Cluttering? I repeated. We're trying to simplify the household. Simplify. I opened a cabinet. My baking tins were gone. Where are my things? In storage, Daniel said quickly. You weren't using them. I closed the cabinet slowly. I made the lemon tart last week. And left the oven on, Colleen added. I looked at her. For 3 minutes. It's a hazard, she replied. There it was again. Hazard, risk, liability. Daniel grabbed his briefcase. Let's not do this today. Do what? I asked. Turn everything into a battle. I didn't realize reclaiming my salt was warfare. He didn't smile. After he left, I tried to make myself an omelet. The non-stick pan had been replaced too. The new one stuck like glue. I scraped at it with a wooden spatula until Colleen stepped in. You're scratching it, she said sharply. I've been cooking longer than you've been alive. That doesn't mean you're doing it right. The words landed hard. I set the spatula down. You know, she continued, softer but edged, this is exactly why Daniel worries. You don't adapt well. I turned to face her fully. Adapt to what? Being erased? Her expression didn't change. Being supported. Supported. That afternoon, Oliver came home from school. He ran to me first, as he always did. Grandma, are you coming to my science fair next week? Of course, I said. Colleen stepped in. We'll see. Oliver frowned. Why? Grandma gets tired, she said smoothly. Too much excitement isn't good for her. I'm not porcelain, I said quietly. Daniel returned early again. He called a family meeting in the den. I took my usual seat. They remained standing. We need clearer boundaries, Daniel began. Between whom? I asked. Between you and the household structure, Colleen replied. I almost laughed. Daniel continued. From now on, financial decisions above a certain amount need to be discussed. With you? I said. Yes. No. His face darkened. Mom? No, I repeated calmly. You will not supervise my spending. It affects all of us, he snapped. Only if you've built your plans on money that isn't yours. Colleen crossed her arms. This isn't sustainable. You're right, I said. Daniel blinked. So you agree? I agree something isn't sustainable. He hesitated. Then let's be practical. We've scheduled an appointment. With whom? A specialist, just to evaluate where things stand. Things, I echoed. Cognitive baseline, Colleen clarified. Standard procedure. For whom? I asked again. For you. There it was, out loud. No lemon disinfectant to soften it. And if I refuse? I asked. Daniel's voice hardened. Then we have to consider other steps. Such as? He didn't answer. Colleen did. Formal guardianship proceedings. The room went very still. Oliver's laughter drifted faintly from upstairs. I folded my hands in my lap so they wouldn't see them tremble, not from fear, but from the effort of holding still. You think you can declare me incapable, I said slowly, and take control. It's about protection, Daniel insisted. No, I replied. It's about possession. He stepped closer. You're not acting like family. The words hit me again, sharper this time because they were deliberate. Family, I said quietly, doesn't schedule evaluations behind closed doors. Colleen's eyes narrowed. If you make this difficult, Harriet, we can request an emergency hearing. I studied both of them. Then I stood, slowly, carefully. Every movement intentional. You will cancel that appointment, I said. Daniel shook his head. We're past that. No, I corrected. You are. I walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? Colleen demanded. To rest, I replied. From what? She shot back. I paused on the first step and turned just enough for them to hear me clearly. From being patient. I climbed the staircase without using the railing this time. My knees screamed. I did not. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, because of clarity. When you reach 79, insomnia isn't dramatic, it's practical. Your mind begins sorting things the way you used to sort flour from sugar, carefully, deliberately, without spilling. Around midnight, I heard Daniel's office door close downstairs. Then low voices. Then the faint scrape of a chair. I waited. At 12:40 a.m., footsteps crossed the hallway outside my room and faded toward the staircase. A door shut. Silence followed. I counted to 60, twice. Then I stood. My knees protested immediately, but I ignored them. I slipped on my cardigan and opened my door without a sound. The hallway light was off. Only the glow from the street lamp filtered through the window at the end of the corridor. I moved slowly down the stairs. Not fragile. Strategic. The den door was closed, but not latched. Inside, Daniel's laptop sat open on the desk. A yellow legal pad lay beside it, half covered by a gray folder I recognized. H. Whitaker, Capacity Review. They hadn't even changed the title. I stepped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The folder was thicker now. Inside were printed emails between Daniel and a law office, Morrison and Dale. I noted the date, 3 weeks ago, before the fundraiser, before the frozen account. One email read, "We believe Mrs. Whitaker's recent financial behavior indicates impaired judgment. We would like to move forward with an emergency guardianship petition if possible." Impaired judgment. Attached were notes. Bullet points. Unauthorized spending at public event. Increasing hostility. Paranoia regarding household finances. Resistance to assistance. Resistance to assistance. I felt something cold settle under my ribs. There was also a typed summary labeled Observed Decline. It listed small things, forgetting where I left my cane, which I had placed deliberately, misplacing a grocery list, which I had thrown away, asking the same question twice, because I hadn't liked the first answer. Each item twisted into evidence. I took out my phone. I photographed everything, every page, every signature block, every timestamp. Then I saw something that made my pulse slow, not quicken. Slow. A draft document authorizing a home equity line of credit. Under borrower name, Daniel Whitaker. Under cosigner, Harriet M. Whitaker. My signature space blank. They weren't just planning to control my accounts. They were planning to leverage my name, my credit, my history. I placed the document back exactly as I'd found it. Then I opened the legal pad. In Daniel's handwriting, once guardianship granted, consolidate accounts, move primary assets, begin Phase 2 renovation. Phase 2. I almost admired the efficiency. Footsteps creaked overhead. I froze. A toilet flushed. Water ran. I waited until the pipes stopped rattling. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened Daniel's laptop. He'd left it unlocked, careless. I didn't search through everything. I didn't need to. His email inbox was still open. There it was again, Morrison and Dale. Subject line, next steps before filing. I forwarded the entire email chain to myself. Then I logged out, closed the laptop, returned everything to its precise position. By the time I reached the staircase, my knees felt like splintered glass. I gripped the railing this time. Halfway up, I paused, not from pain, but from memory. Daniel at 8 years old, building a model rocket at the kitchen table. Daniel at 16, slamming his bedroom door because I wouldn't let him borrow the car. Daniel at 35, sitting in my old living room, telling me it would be smart to combine resources. Somewhere between those moments, he had decided I was a stepping stone instead of a person. Back in my room, I locked the door. Then I opened my laptop. I forwarded the email chain to a second address. My attorney. Yes, I had one. I'd hired her quietly 2 days ago after leaving the bank. Eleanor Pierce, 72. Sharp as cracked ice. I attached the photographs. Then I typed a single sentence. They are preparing to file. I hit send. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Whitaker, a woman's voice said. Calm, measured. This is Eleanor Pierce. I believe we need to accelerate. Yes, I said quietly. I believe we do. We'll file first. For what? For financial exploitation prevention and declaratory capacity confirmation. I smiled faintly. Good, I said. Upstairs, the house was silent. Downstairs, in that gray folder, they believed they were building a case. They didn't know I had just built a stronger one. The appointment they scheduled for my evaluation was set for Thursday at 11. I scheduled something of my own for Thursday at 10. Daniel thought he was driving me to the specialist. I let him believe that. We arrived early. A modern medical building with polished glass doors and a waiting room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and eucalyptus oil. Colleen insisted on coming too. For support, she said. I walked in ahead of them. At the reception desk, I gave my name. The woman smiled. Mrs. Whitaker, Dr. Ames will see you shortly. Daniel exhaled, satisfied. 10 minutes later, a door opened. Mrs. Whitaker? I stood, but instead of a neurologist in a white coat, Eleanor Pierce stepped into the waiting room, navy suit. Silver hair pulled back tightly, expression unreadable. Daniel froze. Mrs. Whitaker, Eleanor repeated, her voice steady. We're ready. Colleen blinked. I'm sorry. Who are you? Eleanor turned calmly. Eleanor Pierce, counsel for Mrs. Harriet Whitaker. Silence hit the room like a dropped plate. Daniel's voice came out thin. Mom, what is this? This, I said evenly, is my appointment. Colleen's composure fractured first. You brought a lawyer to a cognitive evaluation? No, Eleanor replied. We filed for declaratory confirmation of capacity this morning, along with a motion to block any guardianship petition based on financial coercion. Daniel's face went pale. That's ridiculous, he snapped. We were protecting her. Eleanor didn't look at him. The court will review the email chain you so thoughtfully documented. His eyes darted to mine. I held his gaze. Look at this moment. A waiting room. A son realizing his mother was ahead of him. Would you have warned him or stayed silent? Right below. Colleen stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. You went through our private files. You drafted legal documents in my name, I replied, without consent. Daniel's jaw clenched. We hadn't filed anything yet. Intent, Eleanor said calmly, is still relevant. A nurse approached uncertainly. Is there an issue? Yes, Eleanor answered smoothly. There is, and we'll handle it in conference room B. She turned to me. Shall we? I stood without assistance. My knees hurt, yes, but not as much as they had that night on the staircase. Daniel followed us into the conference room, anger simmering beneath his skin. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "Am I?" I asked. "You embarrassed us." "No," I corrected gently. "You underestimated me." Colleen crossed her arms. "This will get ugly." "It already did," I said. Eleanor opened a folder, thicker than Daniel's gray one. "I suggest," she said calmly, "we discuss the home equity application drafted with Mrs. Whitaker, listed as co-signer." Daniel's head snapped toward her. "That was preliminary." "Without authorization," Eleanor replied. I watched him then. Really watched him. Not my little boy. Not the teenager with scraped knees. A man calculating risk. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" he asked, almost desperate now. "I tried," I said softly. "You were too busy planning." Silence stretched between us. Eleanor slid a document across the table. "A temporary financial protection order," she said. "Effective immediately." Daniel looked at it. His shoulders dropped slightly. "You filed against your own son," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "I filed for myself." Colleen leaned back in her chair, eyes cold. "You've made this adversarial now." I met her gaze. "No," I replied. "I've made it official." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. No shouting, no tears, just paper, just signatures, just consequences beginning to take shape. By the time we left the medical building, the air outside felt thinner. Daniel walked ahead of us toward the parking lot, his steps sharp and uneven. Colleen followed, heels striking the pavement like punctuation marks. Eleanor remained beside me. "They'll react," she said quietly. "I know. They may escalate socially if not legally. I know that too." She stopped before we reached the car. "You understand, this will likely fracture the relationship permanently." I looked at my son's back as he unlocked the vehicle. "It fractured when he called me not family," I said. Eleanor nodded once. "Good. Clarity is useful." She handed me another folder, cream-colored, neatly tabbed. "Inside is a draft revision of your estate plan. We can redirect distributions, secure a trust structure, and isolate liquid assets. No one touches anything without your signature." "Do it," I said. Daniel turned as we approached. "What now?" he demanded. "Now," Eleanor replied calmly. "Mrs. Whitaker's accounts are insulated. Any attempt to access, leverage, or represent her financially will trigger immediate legal review." Colleen's lips thinned. "You're making us look like criminals." Eleanor's voice didn't change. Appearances tend to follow actions. The drive home was silent. Daniel gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. Colleen stared out the window. I watched reflections slide across the glass. Passing storefronts, trees bending slightly in the wind. When we pulled into the driveway, Daniel cut the engine, but didn't move. "You've destroyed trust," he said without turning around. "No," I replied. "I corrected a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" "That I was yours to manage." He looked at me then. For the first time in weeks, there was no calculation in his eyes. Just anger. "You don't even know how complicated our finances are," he said. "We needed that equity line." "For phase 2? I asked quietly. His expression shifted. Colleen stepped out of the car abruptly, slamming the door. Inside the house, she didn't wait long. "You've humiliated us," she said, pacing the kitchen. "Do you realize what people will say?" I'm less concerned with what people say, I replied, than with what documents say. Daniel ran a hand over his face. We were trying to secure our future. At my expense, I said. He didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. An attempted login. Failed. Another one. Failed again. I showed Daniel the screen. You see, I said calmly, this is what I mean. He stared at the notification. That wasn't me, he muttered. Then someone in this house is very interested in my password. Colleen's voice cut in from behind him. Maybe you're imagining threats where there are none. I met her gaze. Maybe you're discovering there are consequences. That evening, Oliver knocked on my bedroom door. Grandma, he whispered. Are you mad at Dad? I softened immediately. I'm disappointed. Is that worse? Yes, I said honestly. He crawled onto the edge of my bed. I heard them arguing, he said. Mom said you don't trust us. I trust behavior, I replied, not promises. He frowned, thinking. Are you leaving? He asked. The question settled heavily between us. Not yet, I said, but I was no longer staying blindly. After he left, I opened Eleanor's folder again. Trust amendments, asset protection clauses, healthcare directives, naming someone other than Daniel. My pen hovered over the signature line. 79 years old, not incapable, not confused, not owned. I signed. Downstairs, I could hear Daniel and Colleen arguing in low, urgent tones. Upstairs, I was rewriting the future. They didn't explode right away. That would have been easier. Instead, they recalibrated. The next morning, Daniel knocked on my door, softly this time. Can we talk? He asked. I was already dressed. Of course. He stepped inside but remained standing, as though sitting would concede something. I've been thinking, he began. Maybe we pushed too fast. Yes, I said. That doesn't mean we were wrong. It means you were premature, I replied calmly. He exhaled. We're under pressure, Mom. The renovations went over budget. The contractor wants deposits for Phase 2. Property taxes increased. We thought consolidating assets would simplify everything. By consolidating, you mean absorbing mine. He flinched. We're family, he said. You said I wasn't. His jaw tightened again. I said that in frustration. Intent still matters, I replied. He looked down at his hands. We just needed flexibility. With my credit, I said. He didn't answer. Later that day, the pressure became less subtle. A man in a gray suit knocked at the front door. Colleen answered. I heard her voice shift. Sweet? Professional? Yes, come in. From the hallway, I watched as the man introduced himself. Martin Hale, financial consultant. I stepped forward. For whom? Daniel appeared behind him. For us. Martin extended a polite smile. We're just reviewing options for long-term household optimization. Are you? I asked. Yes, he said smoothly. Given recent instability, it's wise to reassess asset positioning. Instability. I folded my hands in front of me. And which assets concern you most? I asked. He glanced briefly at Daniel before answering. Jointly exposed capital. I have no jointly exposed capital, I said evenly. Colleen interjected. That's what we're trying to fix. Martin cleared his throat. If certain accounts remain isolated, it limits borrowing capacity. Good, I said. He blinked. Pardon? Limited borrowing capacity prevents overextension. Daniel's patience snapped. You're suffocating us. With boundaries? I asked. With control, he shot back. No, I corrected quietly. With ownership. Martin shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps this discussion should remain private. It is, I said. This is my house, too. Colleen laughed once, short and sharp. Not legally. The words hung there. Not legally. Daniel's eyes flicked toward her. Too late. I absorbed it without visible reaction. Thank you for your time, Mr. Hale, I said calmly. But you won't be reviewing my accounts. He hesitated. I was informed this was a shared strategy. You were misinformed. Daniel stepped closer to me. Mom, you can't block everything. It's not sustainable. It doesn't have to be, I replied. Martin gathered his portfolio awkwardly. Perhaps I should return another time. You won't, I said. After he left, the house felt smaller. You're forcing us into a corner, Colleen said. No, I answered. You built yourselves into one. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. If we can't access equity, we'll have to restructure entirely. Then restructure, I said. At what cost? He demanded. I held his gaze. Not mine. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was shifting. That evening, I received another call from Eleanor. They've reached out to 2 financial institutions, she informed me, attempting to pre-qualify for borrowing based on anticipated asset consolidation. They're accelerating, I said. Yes, which means they're feeling pressure. I want everything insulated by tomorrow, I replied. It will be. I ended the call and looked around my room, my lavender sachet, my folded scarves, the small framed photo of Daniel at age 5, flour on his cheeks from helping me knead dough. How quickly affection turns transactional when money enters the room. Downstairs, I could hear raised voices again. Daniel and Colleen this time arguing with each other. Blame travels fast when leverage disappears. I sat on the edge of my bed and flexed my knees. They hurt, but less than before, because now the pain had direction. The letter arrived 3 days later. Certified mail. Colleen brought it into the kitchen like it was something fragile. This is for you, she said, placing it on the counter in front of me. Daniel watched from across the room. I recognized Eleanor's firm letterhead immediately. I opened it slowly. Notice of protective filing, it read. Temporary financial safeguard order granted pending review. Daniel's breath shifted. What does that mean? He asked. It means, I said calmly, that no one may initiate debt instruments, equity lines, or financial restructuring using my name, credit, or assets without judicial authorization. Colleen's voice sharpened. You filed a court order? I filed protection, I corrected. Daniel stepped forward. You escalated this. No, I said. You did. I just responded faster. He stared at the paper. This makes us look like we were exploiting you. I folded the letter carefully. Were you not? Silence. That afternoon, things unraveled more quickly than I expected. Daniel's phone rang while he was in the den. His voice carried into the hallway. Yes. I understand. No, that's not accurate. It's a misunderstanding. A pause. You're freezing the review? Another pause. Based on what? I didn't need to hear the answer. When he emerged, his expression had shifted from anger to something more dangerous. Fear. The bank flagged our preliminary inquiry, he said. They're reviewing the attempted equity application. As they should, I replied. You told them. I informed them. Colleen's composure cracked. Do you realize what that does to our financial profile? Yes. You're damaging our credibility. You were leveraging mine. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. We hadn't signed anything. You drafted it, I said quietly. That was enough. He paced once across the kitchen. This could trigger a fraud review. That depends, I replied, on how it was submitted. He stopped. Colleen looked at him. For the first time, I saw uncertainty between them. Daniel, she said. It was pre-qualification, he muttered. Nothing formal. In whose name? I asked. He didn't answer. My phone buzzed. A message from Eleanor. They've requested clarification from the lender. We have documentation. I looked at Daniel. You used my name. It was strategic, he snapped. We needed stronger terms. You needed my history, I said. Colleen stepped back slightly. I told you this was risky. Daniel turned on her. You're the one who pushed phase 2. And you're the one who said she'd never notice. The room went still. They both realized what had just slipped out. I didn't raise my voice. You underestimated me, I said softly. Daniel's face drained of color. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Colleen grabbed her purse. This is spiraling. Yes, I agreed. She turned toward the door. We can't stay here if this becomes a legal battlefield. There it was. Not you can't stay. We can't. Daniel looked at me as though calculating something he hadn't anticipated. If this goes public, he said carefully, it affects Oliver. Then you should have thought of him, I replied. He swallowed. What do you want? He asked finally. I considered the question. I want autonomy, I said. And acknowledgement. He didn't respond. Because acknowledgement requires admission. That evening, a second notification arrived. The lender had suspended their review pending legal verification of co-signer consent. Translation? They believed I hadn't agreed. Because I hadn't. Daniel sat at the dining table long after dinner, staring at nothing. Colleen remained upstairs. The house no longer felt like a shared investment. It felt like contested territory. I climbed the stairs slowly that night. Halfway up, Daniel spoke without looking at me. You didn't have to humiliate us. I paused. I didn't, I said. You did. Then I continued upward. Each step still hurt, but now the structure beneath me was steady. They chose the school fundraiser for their move. Not the glittering gala from before. This one was smaller. Parents, faculty, local donors. Folding chairs in neat rows inside the academy gymnasium. A banner behind the podium read, Future Expansion Initiative. Oliver stood with his classmates near the front, clutching a tri-fold poster about renewable energy. I sat in the second row. Daniel was scheduled to speak. When his name was announced, polite applause followed. He walked to the podium with practiced confidence. Colleen stood off to the side, hands folded, expression composed. We're proud supporters of this institution, Daniel began. Family is the foundation of everything we build. The word echoed. Family. I felt my spine straighten. He continued. And sometimes supporting family means making difficult decisions. Long-term planning. Responsible restructuring. A few heads nodded. He was framing it, softening it, preparing the room. Colleen stepped forward slightly when he gestured toward me. My mother has been part of our journey, he said. As we navigate transitions, Transitions. There it was. Someone behind me whispered, "Isn't that the capacity situation?" I didn't wait for him to finish. I stood, slowly. The gym fell quieter, not silent, but attentive. Daniel faltered mid-sentence. "Mom," he said into the microphone, strained smile fixed in place. I walked forward, cane in hand, not for support, but for punctuation. When I reached the podium, I didn't take the microphone immediately. I looked at him first. "May I?" I asked. He hesitated, then handed it over. The sound system hummed faintly. "My name is Harriet Whitaker," I began, voice clear. "I am 79 years old. I bake a respectable apricot galette. I manage my own accounts, and I have not lost my mind." A ripple of awkward laughter moved through the room. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I understand there have been discussions," I continued, "about my capacity. My judgment, my so-called decline." Colleen shifted visibly. "I would like to clarify something," I said. "No guardianship petition has been granted. No incapacity has been declared. In fact, I have formally secured my financial autonomy through legal protection." Whispers now, not polite ones. Daniel stepped closer. "Mom, this isn't appropriate." "What isn't appropriate," I replied calmly, "is implying vulnerability in public while pursuing leverage in private." Silence fell heavier this time. I turned slightly toward the audience. "If any financial instruments were drafted using my name without consent," I said evenly, "they are now under review." A sharp inhale somewhere behind me. Colleen's face had lost its color. Daniel reached for the microphone, but I held it steady. "I am not confused," I said. "I am not incapable, and I am not a stepping stone for expansion." The words landed clean. No shouting, no drama. Just fact. From the front row, Oliver stared at me wide-eyed. I softened my tone. "I love my grandson," I said. "And I support this school. But support is not surrender." Grace here for a moment. Picture this gymnasium. Folding chairs, parents frozen mid-breath, a son realizing the narrative just slipped from his hands. Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have spoken too? Tell me below. Daniel finally took the microphone. "This is a misunderstanding," he said tightly. "Then clarify it," I replied. He didn't. Because clarification requires truth. The headmaster stepped in, smoothing things over, thanking everyone for their contributions, suggesting refreshments in the lobby. Applause, uneven, uncertain. I stepped down from the podium without assistance. As I passed Daniel, he whispered, "You've turned this into a spectacle." "No," I said quietly. "You did." Colleen didn't speak at all. In the parking lot afterward, conversations followed us in fragments. Legal protection? Equity application. Without consent? Daniel unlocked the car in silence. But something fundamental had shifted. Not in the house, in the narrative. And once a story changes publicly, it rarely returns to its original shape. They didn't speak to me during the drive home. Not a word. The silence felt heavier than any argument we'd had. Public exposure does that. It strips strategy, leaves only consequences. When we walked inside, Daniel closed the front door carefully, too carefully. Colleen didn't remove her coat. "You blindsided us," she said flatly. "No," I replied, placing my cane by the wall. "I corrected a narrative." Daniel turned to face me fully. "You embarrassed me in front of colleagues." "In front of Oliver. I prevented you from embarrassing me further." He took a step closer. You made it sound criminal. Was it not? It was planning, he snapped. Risk management. With forged authority? I asked. His face tightened. I never forged anything, he said. You submitted a pre-qualification using my name. It wasn't binding. It was presumptive. Colleen let out a frustrated breath. You're twisting everything. No, I said evenly. I'm naming it. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. Do you even understand the damage you've done? Yes. And you don't care? I held his gaze. I care deeply, I said quietly. That's why I acted. Silence stretched between us again. Then Colleen spoke. Lower this time. Calculating. If this continues legally, it affects credit reviews, background checks, Daniel's partnerships. Then perhaps, I said, it shouldn't continue. Daniel looked up sharply. Meaning? Withdraw the equity application entirely. Provide written acknowledgement that no guardianship petition will be filed. Publicly clarify the misunderstanding at the next board meeting. Colleen stared at me. You're negotiating? No, I replied. I'm establishing boundaries. Daniel's voice dropped. And if we refuse? Then Eleanor proceeds. His jaw clenched. You'd testify against your own son? I'd testify for myself. That stopped him. Colleen moved closer to Daniel, her voice urgent but controlled. This is escalating beyond reason. We need to contain it. Contain it, as though I were the fire. Daniel looked at me differently now, not with anger, with assessment. You planned this, he said slowly. You've been planning since the bank. Yes. For how long? Since I heard you say I wasn't family. The words landed heavier this time. He looked away first. I didn't mean it, he muttered. I know, I said softly. You meant something worse. Colleen's composure cracked again. We were trying to secure our future. By compromising mine. Daniel's shoulders sagged slightly. What do you want, Mom? He asked again, but this time without accusation. I want acknowledgement, I said. Out loud. He hesitated. I misjudged you, he said finally. More, I replied. He swallowed. I shouldn't have pursued guardianship without speaking to you. And? I shouldn't have used your name for leverage. There it was. Clear, direct, unavoidable. Colleen stared at him as though he had betrayed her instead. Daniel continued, quieter now. I was wrong. The word seemed to cost him something physical. I nodded once. Good, I said. Silence followed, but it was different now, less charged, more structural. Colleen crossed her arms. And the protective order? It remains, I said calmly. For now. Daniel exhaled slowly. What does that mean? It means trust isn't restored by confession. His eyes met mine again. Are you leaving? He asked. I considered the question carefully. Yes, I said. Both of them froze. Not today, I added, but soon. Colleen's voice sharpened. You'll destroy this household. No, I said quietly. You did that when you decided control was love. I turned toward the stairs. My knees burned with every step. But this time, the pain didn't feel like weakness. It felt like transition. The mediation was scheduled for Monday at 9. Neutral office, neutral carpet, neutral lighting, rooms designed to contain conflict without absorbing it. Daniel arrived first. Colleen beside him, posture rigid. I entered with Eleanor. No raised voices this time. No audience of parents or contractors. Just paper. Just signatures. We sat across from each other at a long conference table. A mediator, thin man with wire-frame glasses, outlined the structure. This session concerns alleged financial misrepresentation, attempted guardianship preparation, and related asset disputes. Daniel winced slightly at the phrasing. I did not. Eleanor opened her folder and slid copies across the table. Email chains. Draft equity applications. Guardianship preparation notes. Time-stamped. Documented. Undeniable. Daniel's attorney skimmed quickly, then slower. Colleen's composure began to fracture at the edges. We were acting in good faith, she said tightly. Good faith requires consent, Eleanor replied calmly. The mediator turned to Daniel. Were you aware that Mrs. Whitaker had not authorized co-signature use? Daniel's silence lasted 3 seconds too long. Yes, he said finally. Colleen turned toward him sharply. You said, I know what I said, he muttered. The mediator made a note. Pause here, no shouting. Just a son admitting he acted without his mother's consent. Would you forgive in that moment or draw the line right there? Tell me in the comments. Eleanor spoke next. Our position is simple. Full withdrawal of the equity application. Written acknowledgement of unauthorized preliminary submission. Formal statement rescinding any guardianship intent. And independent housing arrangements within 60 days. Colleen's head snapped toward me. You're evicting yourself? She asked. I'm reclaiming space, I said. Daniel looked at me, not angry now, cornered. You're really leaving, he said quietly. Yes. The mediator folded his hands. Mr. Whitaker, do you contest the financial protection order? Daniel stared at the documents in front of him, at the emails he had written, at the draft petition that described me as declining. No, he said. Colleen inhaled sharply. Daniel? No, he repeated. We withdraw the application. All of it. Eleanor nodded once. Additionally, she continued, Mrs. Whitaker has amended her estate structure. Certain beneficiaries and trustees have been reassigned. Daniel's head lifted slowly. You changed the will, he said. Yes. To who? That, I replied, is private. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation, because this wasn't about control anymore. It was about consequence. The mediator summarized the agreement. Withdrawal confirmed. No guardianship petition. No financial representation. No asset leverage. Formal written acknowledgement of misjudgment. Daniel signed first. His pen hovered for a moment before touching paper. Colleen signed next, slower. Then it was my turn. My hand did not shake. When it was finished, the mediator gathered the documents neatly. This matter, he said, is formally contained. Contained. I stood carefully. Daniel did not. Mom, he said softly. I paused. I didn't think you'd fight, he admitted. That, I replied evenly, was your mistake. I walked toward the door with Eleanor beside me. Just before exiting, I turned back. One more thing, I said calmly. Do not ever confuse aging with surrender again. No one responded, because there was nothing left to argue. I moved out 42 days later, not 60. 42. I found a small townhouse 15 minutes away. 2 floors, yes, but with a proper railing and wide steps. A narrow kitchen with excellent light in the mornings. I placed my old percolator back on the stove the first day. The sound of it brewing felt like a heartbeat returning. Daniel helped carry 2 boxes inside. We didn't speak much. Oliver hugged me tightly before leaving. "Can I still come over?" he asked. "You always have a key," I said. Colleen remained in the car. That seemed appropriate. The house I left behind did not collapse. Phase 2 renovations were postponed. The equity line was withdrawn officially. Daniel sent the board a clarification email about miscommunication regarding family legal planning. Not a full confession, but enough. 2 weeks after I settled in, I finalized my estate amendments. Eleanor sat across from me as I signed. A trust established, liquid assets secured, distribution structured. Daniel remained a beneficiary, but not the primary one. Oliver's education trust was reinforced, safeguarded, independent of his parents' access, and one additional clause, very specific. Any attempt to challenge my capacity without documented medical basis would trigger automatic forfeiture of discretionary inheritance portions. Eleanor looked at me after reading it aloud. "Firm," she said. "Clear," I corrected. When the documents were complete, I walked home slowly. My knees still hurt on the incline near Maple Street. Age does not disappear because dignity returns. But something inside me felt steadier. Daniel called 3 days later. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "That's good," I replied. "I didn't see it happening," he admitted. "The shift. From helping to controlling." "I did," I said. "I'm sorry," he added. This time it didn't sound strategic. It sounded tired. "I know," I said. Silence lingered. "I don't expect things to go back," he said. "They won't," I replied gently. "But they can go forward." That was the most honest thing he'd said in months. We meet for lunch sometimes now. Neutral places. Cafes that smell like espresso and toasted bread. We speak about Oliver, about work, about weather. Not about guardianship, not about equity lines. Trust does not reset like a password. It rebuilds slowly, or it doesn't. My dear viewers, what would you have done? Stayed silent to keep peace? Or fought to keep yourself? Harriet chose clarity over comfort. I'm not saying it was easy or even entirely gentle, but it was hers. If this story meant something to you, like subscribe and tell me in the comments. When did you realize aging is not surrender?